everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Writers Chat. We're so glad that you're here with us, whether you're here live in the chat community or whether you're watching the replay. If you're watching the replay, we do invite you to join us live every Tuesday morning, 11 o'clock Eastern, 10 o'clock Central. We'd love to have you with us. I'm Johnnie Alexander. I'm joined today by my co-host, Melissa Stroh, and our special guest, Joe Massaro. We're going to be talking about historical research and how we do that. I've written a historical novel and a couple historical novellas. Melissa is under contract for a 3-book series, all historicals. And so we're just going to share a little bit about how we do research and organize it and all that kind of thing. So we're going to sort of turn it over to Jo and let her lead the conversation, and we're really happy to have her with us.
Throw me right in there. Okay.
Yeah, we're just going to throw you right in there.
Okay, let me just say that I am not in any way an expert on research. So this was a question that I had a couple of months ago, and I was really interested in learning more about it because it's going to be one of the things that I start in September. And so I thought, if I'm looking at this question, a lot of other people were probably looking at it as well. So in starting, I know that research overall is a huge task. It is like daunting to think about, oh my gosh, I've got to research. And so one of the things that I am learning is that I really have to break it down. Yeah. Break it down into smaller pieces, and please feel free to jump in. Because you guys are more of the experts, but you know, I'll just give you a little example. My book that I'm going to be starting is going to be happening around the time of Versailles with King Louis XIV, the Sun King, and one of my main characters is going to be a gardener.
Awesome.
So I have to look at gardening in that time frame. I have to look at the political atmosphere of that time frame. I have to look at the clothing. I have to look at the food, the manners, you know, anything that you can possibly think of, I have to research. And so when I looked at that, I was like, okay, this is a lot.
That is a lot.
It is a lot, yes. And one of the things I've learned, if you're going to talk about history, you want to get it right.
Yes.
So you don't want to be, you know, just second guessing or, you know, putting this in and not have it be accurate. And you guys have done a lot of research. So what would you say are some of the biggest things that could benefit someone who's just starting out? Because that's where a lot of people that I know are just starting out. And so maybe you could help them in that aspect.
Melissa, you want to go first?
When I first undertook to write historical fiction, I was pretty much new at it too. So I was starting at a complete unknown, and I kind of fell back on the things I learned in high school as far as basic research for papers and things like that. And so I started out just broad. I kind of pondered, you know, what periods I wanted to set my book in. What I and would go with a general history of that location. I kind of started with a location first. So eventually I settled on Ireland, and I wanted to know what period would fit my story, because I already had a story that I was converting to historical fiction in this instance, where, you know, some people, they just have an idea and they start out, and I have that with other books. But in that instance, I already had a story, but I needed to convert it, and I wanted to put it in a period. And so I did a broad research of Ireland's history in general, and until I come to a period that it just kind of spoke to me. It just shot out, yes, this is it. This is the one that I need. And then I began to narrow in, and I found books that would pertain to that specific period itself. And I oftentimes relied on the bibliographies of those basic books as I started out. I'd go to the back and see who they cited, or if they quoted somebody often enough, I'd make a note of that, and I'd go look into their information. And you just kind of begin to narrow down from there. Also, with everything being online now, a lot of people will start with the basics there. You know, you look for your websites that cover those histories, and then just kind of narrow down for their references. But you do want to be careful online. Like a lot of people will rely on Wikipedia, things like that. It might be good for your basic start. It's not reliable at all. So yeah, you go there and you narrow down as well.
I like Wikipedia to start out with, but Melissa's right. You do have to be careful what you find there, and some of the entries are much more cited than others, because you'll see all the little footnotes, and you can go down and you can see where they got the information, so you can back into that too, which is a really good thing to do. Is just, but Wikipedia is good for giving an overview, or at least giving you some general information, and then like I said, you can go to the original source, or it can lead you to other places, to other sites where that information is going to be accurate. So that's a really good place to start, I guess, but just don't rely on it, like Melissa said.
Yeah, definitely.
Also, I think, to answer Joe's question too, just getting what's something important, I think being organized, and I won't say that I was always well organized with research, and sometimes that creates issues. You've got to find a way to keep everything together and to keep it straight. Since we had a guest on not too long ago, we do have a Writer's Chat episode on Evernote, and I think we all downloaded it that very day. And I have been since then creating notebooks in Evernote and putting links in, and so at least it's all in the same place. I can go back and find it again. So.
Yeah, I so agree. That Evernote episode was wonderful, and I think that's really the key, because one of the things I had asked Melissa, who was very kind in answering some of these things, was, what do you do with all of the information that you get? Because if it's not organized, how do you go back and find it? And so that was a great one. One of the things that in researching, as I was looking at some things, they were talking about using sometimes documentaries on PBS. If you have art issues or anything like that, you can go, look at museums. You could use old newspapers, photos, catalogs, anything, even an online course. If you're focused on art history, maybe you could do an online course on it. So there's lots of avenues. Oh, you can't hear me very well? Sorry. Can you hear me now?
Is that better?
Thank you, Rhonda, or whoever it was who just said they couldn't hear me.
Yeah, it's Dory. Yeah.
Dory, okay. Hopefully you can. All right, I'm getting closer to the mic. Thank you. If you have a problem, let me know. I'll get my earphones. So let me just look at this. So we talked about organizing it. What do you so you have this huge volume of information. What do you do to say, and you may not be able to answer this question, this would be pertinent maybe to push my story forward, maybe develop the character, enhance the story. And so how do you, if you feel like this is not going to help my story, you just set it aside? Or what do you look at in order to develop your story in your research?
That's kind of a hard one. I'm going to answer that in kind of a roundabout way.
Sure.
When I wrote Where Treasure Hides, it was actually the second World War II story I wrote. And many of you know this, the first one's not yet been published, and I'm kind of working on it again now. So I knew, there were certain things I knew I wanted to have in the story, that historical events. So I knew my hero was going to be captured at Dunkirk. So I knew he was going to be at Dunkirk. I knew he was going to be a POW from then on for a while. I knew I wanted him to end up in Colditz Castle, which was like the impenetrable, you can't escape from, though people did, POW camp in Germany. I knew that, what else did I know? I forget. But there were certain things, that I knew I needed to have happen. So I got a piece of white, like butcher paper, and I put Post-it notes with these dates on it and kind of separated. And that hero story is intertwined with the first book I wrote. So I did have like certain things from it too, like where that hero would be at certain times and what he was doing in the other book, even though it wasn't going to be part of this book, there started to be that gap for him. So now I sort of forgot how I was going with all this, but I think it helped me focus then on, even though I didn't have like midpoints or turning points so much, I had stuff to write towards, and it helped me know where I needed to go. Oh, the bombing of Rotterdam was going to be one of those things. Mm-hmm. So just by knowing some of the historical events, it helped me focus on what was going on in those at those times, and then I could sort of put aside other things.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Did that help? I hope that helps.
I think it did. Do you, when you, let's say for me, I research about gardens. And you feel like you've got this, you really want to get it down. Would you at that point in time feel that you could write something at that point in time and about in your story and then go back to it later on? Or do you do all of your research first?
Oh, no.
Okay.
I don't.
Okay.
There'll be certain topics where I get enough information ahead of time that I'll start to incorporate them, and other things I research as I go. I'm what you call a pantser.
I was just going to ask you to please mention pantser and explain it.
Okay, so a pantser is a person who writes by the seat of their pants. They're kind of all over the place, sporadic, and they don't like to be cornered in with too much order when it comes to the creative processes. But not every pantser is really a full-blown pantser. They do have some order they go by, and I call myself a hybrid. So when it comes to research, I'm ultra organized. I create what I call a working timeline, and I do it in a Word document because I'm a little old-fashioned that way. And so I create searchable headings of every date. And I put in actual dates that I've found along the way, and I just compile as I go. And I also put character fictional dates and things in as well, all chronologically. And I just separate these with little asterisks. I can even, at some point, if somebody wants, I can even screen share and show it to you so you can kind of see what it looks like. But so then when you go and you search, if you need to find something quick, it's there. And I do that with my research too. I have documents with searchable headings and subheadings, and I can just go click and find whatever information I need just by opening up the document and searching it. And I've always done it that way.
I didn't know you could do searchable headings. Rhonda Dragomir has taught us a couple times on Microsoft Word, so we do have episodes on that too, and she may have taught us how to do that, but I don't remember it.
It's actually really easy, and I could even I could show that even in the screen share if you wanted that.
Just a question that I thought of. All these different classes and everything, all these different programs that we're talking about. Is there an easy way on the website to find those, or do you have to scroll down to go through everyone? Or is there like a list of ones that if you want to, let's say, oh, I'm interested in this, and I can just find a list?
No,
you know what I'm saying?
It probably depends on the topic. I don't know. And maybe I'm not understanding your question either.
Okay, so if I wanted to learn more about the Evernote one, do I have to scroll through the entire...
The episodes for a writer's chat?
Yes. Do I have to go through everything in order to find it?
Probably, yeah.
Okay.
A couple things you could do is just go to the YouTube channel and make sure you have the Writer's Chat YouTube channel, which is under Serious Writer, and they're all there, and that might be an easy way to scroll through. Otherwise, they're also on our Facebook page, the Writer's Chat Facebook page, and in the Writer's Chat group, though that would be harder to search through because there's also a lot of other stuff in the group. But I think on the page, we pretty much keep just the episodes on it. So that would be a good place to go. We do not have a a good list. If anyone wants to take on that task, we would welcome it.
I think I'm going to pass on that one. But
it's not going to happen.
if you go to my website, sorry, I can't talk today. My website, mnstroh.com, you can actually go to the search and type in Evernote, and it will bring up that Writer's Chat replay post. And then it'll take you straight to the video when you click on the link.
Tell us your website again, Melissa.
Yeah, all low caps, mnstroh.com.
Yeah.
And I'll put it in the chat.
And so for those of you listening to the replay, it's mnstroh.com.
Yeah.
And use the search engine because, yes, I forgot Melissa does a great job of keeping the information on her website too. So thank you.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for that, because I wanted people to know, because we're talking about all these different ones, I wanted people to know how they can actually access all of this information. Is there something that you feel as a researcher that you would want to tell us that's important, or even the little things? I think sometimes the little things are so important that we do.
Yeah, someone in the chat said something about the surprises that you can find when you do research that can work with your story. And I have a really good example of that too. In that first World War II manuscript, I needed my characters to go to Plymouth Sound, or to Plymouth in England. That was like I think it was Portsmouth. That's where they took off for D-Day, and they were coming back, and as the soldiers were coming back that needed medical attention. So my character was going to work in the hospital. But the story was kind of like, I wasn't sure where I was going from there. So I started doing research about Portsmouth, England, just trying to find some, what it would have been like, what it looks like, that kind of thing, and discovered this really cool, and I'll try to keep this really brief, but it was really cool that Plymouth Sound is not too far from there. And if you look out into the water, into the ocean, there are these rocks and with lighthouses, and that lighthouse has been built, one lighthouse, but it's been rebuilt like 3 times. Well, the first or second time it was built, way back in like the 1800s, it was made out of English oak, which is very, very resilient and very strong. Thought they would have this great lighthouse. But the foundation, this is so super, the foundation of that cave was weak because of the storm and the wind and all that. Well, that's a great metaphor, right? Right there, you've got this strong English oak lighthouse, but the foundation is weak. And so eventually the lighthouse needed to be done away with, and now it's a monument to those who built it, and it's actually on land, not out in the island. And they had to move the lighthouse to another rock that was stronger out there. And I was able to use that then as a spiritual thread in my story, as a symbol in my story that I would never have known if I hadn't just been looking around for Portsmouth, so that was so unplanned, and yet it adds depth to that story that would not have been there. So you just never know what you're going to find just by looking. So look. And that was in the middle of writing. That wasn't like planned ahead of time or anything. That was just there.
So there's lots of surprises when you're researching.
Yeah. Right. You can use that. Yeah.
And the other key advice that people always give too is research like you need to know everything, but don't put everything in the story.
Yes.
You can give information overload to your readers.
Yeah, and we like to do that because it's so exciting, right? We just have all this stuff, and that is actually a problem in that first novel. I have stuff in there just because I want people to know it, and you have to cut it. So not fun, but
yeah, it's hard striking the balance too, because you need to have so much to really set the scene and put people in the story, but you can't. Got to find that fine line. It's and the farther back you go, the harder it is, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I just want to put this plug in for Joni because did I say Joni?
Yeah.
I just realized when I said it. Well, you know who I mean, okay? You're going to be I run Yahweh Sisterhood Book Club,
Yes.
And you're going to be with us on in February, or excuse me, September.
Yeah, I'm excited.
And we're going to be doing Where Treasure Hides. So I'm really excited I have your book. I haven't started it yet, but very excited that you're going to be with us. So if you're listening to this, we are on Zoom and you can join us. There's information on our Facebook page.
And we'll put it in the writers chat group too. I'm really excited to do that. And you will see when you read Where Treasure Hides, that whole lighthouse thing kind of pops up in there too. So, that I put in the first book.
Now, I don't know if this is too general of a question, but how do you, if you're writing and there's a faith, you incorporate faith into your book, you know, are you like making it very plain? Is it like more low key, you know, where it builds up, or how do you actually do that? Or have you experienced that at all?
Yeah.
Like, you know what I'm saying, Melissa?
How you apply like a theme of faith that you're trying to do, or the actual faith of the period? Which one are you?
Maybe the faith of the period, I would say, maybe.
Yeah. Well, and for us as Christian writers, you know, you're trying to figure out how to put your faith in there, and sometimes your faith and the faith of your period doesn't quite line up, or it's a little different. I incorporated it in a unique way in my book because in Ireland, of course, during the 10th century, it was predominantly Catholic and conforming to the ideas of the Holy Roman Church, which was represented by Byzantium at that time. Mm-hmm. So the Holy Roman Empire had been split, and Byzantium was the head authority, and the church was basically dictating what all the civilized world needed to believe about Christianity. And Ireland was one of the more rebellious members in that it held to a lot of ideals that weren't completely aligned, but they were slowly coming into it. And so they were, in that essence, a little more lax in their take on faith, and in some ways closer to what the scripture actually had. And so I would dig in and find the little nuggets, the things that were the truth, and I would kind of bring them to light while still alluding to the traditions of the faith and the things that they believed. And I would just kind of put things in here and there. And then there was still a bit of a pagan element as well. There was, I don't address it as much in these books, but there was still Druidism being practiced in Ireland. And because Vikings were established, there are still those who held to the faith in their Odin and their gods. And so
and they believed in Valhalla.
Yes. Yeah. But not quite as staunchly as you think. It was kind of just like a natural part of life for them. It wasn't, that part of it wasn't the same. And so you kind of get a feel for not only their faiths, but also the level of devotion that each one had to it, and where they were crossing lines or where they were accepting others. And actually, because Ireland was becoming so profusely Christian, most of the Scandinavians who came in and lived there adopted Christianity quite quickly. So you see a kind of transitional period where it was fading out and turning towards Christianity more so.
It's interesting.
Yeah.
Johnnie, you want to add anything to that?
I think Melissa covered that pretty well. Yeah, I think it is important to stay true to your historical era. And I guess just in here, I would, and she alluded to this too, just be really careful, not just with faith, but with any thoughts, let's say, or philosophies, or, you know, just be careful about not giving those characters our sensibilities and putting, you know, imposing 21st century thought and into characters lived in the, you know, 1900s or the 1800s or 1700s or whatever. You've got to be very careful about that. And I think it's really, it can be really difficult when you're trying to write a strong female heroine, because we want her to be strong. And of course, during those time periods, a lot of women had pressures that we don't face today. But even then, you know, you've got to remember that she's still operating within that framework and within that time period, and can't be too modern, I guess.
I got a really good example of that in my story. So a lot of people hail Irish and Viking history as being more I guess, what's the word I'm looking for? The women were allowed to be a little more outgoing and forceful and stuff, but even then they weren't, they hail them as having so many more rights than other women of the Middle Ages. And in fact, they did, but not to the extent that some people like to hail it to. So like, for instance, a woman, she had some legal rights, and she could, even in special instances, own land, but was always subservient to the male head. So, for instance, a woman still had to have her marriage arranged by her male caretakers. So if she had a father or a brother that was over her grandfather even, they arranged her marriage. She could agree if she didn't like it or not, and divorce was big in Ireland too, so they could even separate at their time because their definition of marriage was pretty variable. Yeah. But she was still subservient in one regard to the male head. And so I had to portray a woman who was characteristically strong for her period and in all the ways that they counted a woman strong, but she still adhered to the tenets of her time period.
Yeah, yeah.
Maybe you could talk a little bit about as well the language at the time that you're writing and how there's a difference between, in today's world.
Yeah, and that also brings up another fun fact. We will, as Christians, will sometimes try to incorporate scripture, and a lot of people think, okay, old medieval, we'll go with King James 1611, right? And no, it didn't exist at that time. I had to go to the Latin Vulgate, and that's fun to go back and realize there are older versions that And we're in Ireland, that's kind of a fun fact too, because Ireland was noted for preserving a lot of the scriptures during medieval time through the monastic communities. So a lot of copies of scripture actually existed in Ireland at that time while we're being destroyed. But that was one of them, was the Latin Vulgate, and all of the written scriptural things that existed in Ireland were in Latin. And they were translating some into the Irish language at the time. But yeah, anybody who was educated during that period in the monastic communities or in the elite spoke their native language and Latin. And so that was a fun bit there. And so, yeah, you go and you look at the translations and you try to look at old story, folk tales, the scriptures and accounts that they have in the period. And you just you'll take I guess you could say the flavor of the language, maybe some of the rhythm of it, and incorporate it in to give it an older feel. But you try to avoid the really technical stuff that, would confuse people, I guess is how I put it.
Can you put in the chat what is it, the Latin what?
Latin Vulgate.
Okay.
Yeah. I guess it would be Jerome's Latin Vulgate. There actually is a free copy of it online that you can go and look at.
Yeah. That's really cool, and that is a really good point to make sure you're using the scriptures that would be available at the time. And I have to remember that, but usually I can go back to King James, and that's a good, that works. Sometimes too, I think, when you talk about language, if you read books that were written in that time period, like that were contemporary to that time period, because we can't do that when we're going as far back as Melissa is, but you might be able to pick up on some expressions and phrases that have kind of been lost to us. Or if you watch movies, again, that were made during that, like 1940s movies made about 1940s people, you can sort of get an idea of, what they're wearing, what they're doing, their hobbies, and so forth. And then, you just have to watch out for the little things that can mess you up. Like I remember writing about an IV bag in the 1940s, and Jeannie has a background in nursing, said, they would have been glass bottles. Well, it never even occurred to me. So there's also these teeny tiny details that you have to be thoughtful of. So it's like, oh, well, I'm so glad she read that, she knew it. And then things like ballpoint pens, he got out his ballpoint pen and did this. Excuse me. But when did ballpoint pens become a thing? You know, they didn't always have them. And I remember I had to look that up to make sure it was accurate that that's what my character could do. And I don't think it was. I mean, I think I had to use a fountain pen instead. So sometimes these teeny tiny details can just, you know, trip you up too. But you've got, you know, you need to have people reading, and you need to critique partners and all of that, because maybe they'll know something you don't, you know.
Yeah, definitely. And that's where it's fun to try to find people who are experts in the field. Another thing that I did in my research was try to get in contact with people who knew something about the period too. So as I went along, I learned about different professors who specialized in those areas. And I actually contacted several via email and got some responses. And they were actually really helpful. Historical groups specialize in those areas. They're also really nice to get in contact with, and they're passionate about those things too. So you often find friends there, other authors who write in periods that are close to yours, not exact. Sometimes they'll have found information along the way that's helpful, or can point you to people that they might know a bit about what you're doing. Yeah.
Those are really excellent points, because it was suggested to me as well that there's so many professors that you might be able to contact, and historical societies. I mean, just so many avenues that we may not even think about that could open up the door to even other people. Like you're saying, authors are wonderful, by the way. I think authors work so well with each other, and there's a great resource that we don't always think about. So obviously research does not happen, you know, in a few weeks.
It does not. Mine's over a period of years.
That's what I want to know. So go ahead.
Well, people might get scared if they hear how long I've been at it. I'm not your typical example. So I have been researching Irish history for 17 years now.
Wow.
That's not the typical norm. I've a lot of people who've done historical fiction, you know, a couple years, maybe a few, but I was a trial and error writer. But that actually reminded me, where you talk about just going back again to the reference of other authors as a source. That actually is where you can find some of those gold nuggets too, those wonderful things. And definitely don't forsake those authors. You know, one, through a historical group in LinkedIn, I found other people who wrote historical fiction. And there was one gentleman I met who lived over in Salisbury, England, and he had moved to the actual location in Ireland where my stories were set. And so automatically we had this connection, and we talked. And I had just one day had randomly thrown up an example of dialogue that I had wrote, because we were getting into a discussion about historical dialogue. And he gently and kindly corrected me on my example that I set out, and told me, the Irish don't use yes and no. What? That totally revolutionized everything for me. So that I had to go through and realize that their yes and no were responding into the positive, affirmative, or the negative. And so every time I used yes or no responses, or I, which isn't even Irish, that's Scottish English, I had to rephrase it. So like, I do this, or I don't do that, or I don't care for that. And it really changed not only the essence of the dialogue, but the culture. It became something separate from what I knew, and it brought more life to my stories, just from one author's experience in the culture.
That's fascinating. That's so interesting.
What do you think, Johnnie?
Well, I just love what Melissa said. That is just such a cool example. I was going to go back to Rhonda's comment where she tries to put a little bit of dialogue in her book that immediately lets the reader know they're in a different time period. For example, her example is she wrote, "It mattered not." And of course, that's not something that we would say. So, you know, right away, we know we're somewhere else, and that can just give that kind of flavor.
Yeah, definitely.
I understand that. I'm starting my first children's book, and it's Winston the British Bulldog is my favorite.
Winston Churchill.
Yeah, I named him right after Winston Churchill. And I've realized that how he speaks is going to be different from, the other people in the children's book. And so I realize I have to do some research there. I have a very good friend who is from England, so I'm going to hit her up and have her help me on that. But those are the kind of things that we're talking about that you really have to think about when you're writing.
Yeah. And too, like non-native speakers. So in the novel that I'm going back to, I have an American American heroine, and a German hero, and they're all in England, and of course speaking English, but putting a few little German words in his dialogue, just to separate him and to remind readers that he's English is not his language. You can do those kinds of little things too. So, yeah.
And when you incorporate multiple cultures in your books too, then that helps as well. Like in my second book, I incorporate a character who's half Irish and half Dane, and so he speaks both languages. And I'll often just indicate that he's lapsed into one or the other with certain people, but I will kind of spice the dialogue with a few words here and there that are Old Norse, and they're plain in context, so they don't confuse the person, like the simple that kind of sort of thing. Yeah. But ones that they can get in the context and feel like they're in the character's head.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So let me just ask a question too. Are there any questions that people are asking right now, or any information that would be helpful to people listening?
Yeah, I'm trying to.
Several mentioned wanting to see my outlines.
Right. Yeah, we do want to do that. If you want to go ahead and do that, that'd be great.
Okay, let me see. It's been a while since I've done the share, so I have to find
up on that. Dory said that she's in the wrong profession because writing takes so long, and she's always in a hurry, so she doesn't choose the story. But you've got to do a lot of for contemporary. There is research that has to be done. And there has what clothes are they wearing, what foods are they eating, I think with contemporary too, maybe not quite as much research, not nearly as much research, but you still have to. There's still things you're going to have to look up and figure out.
Yeah.
Go ahead. Well, let me say this real quick and then we'll go to this. I have a dear friend who is so good to me because she will take my heroines, and I'll tell her a little bit about their personalities, and she makes closets for me. And then I can go through and pick out the outfits I want those girls to be wearing for different events, and it just helps me not have to do it myself. And it's really cool. Okay, turning it back to Melissa. This is great.
Okay, so here's just a timeline that I created. And you see I've got the headings and stuff, but you see over here where the search bar is opened up, you'll see it's an outline form basically. You have your headings and subheadings, and they're inset in like that. That all comes from this fun little deal up here. So if I wanted to create a new heading, let's say I want to do AD 915. So then I would go in and I would type it. Yeah, I can't type today. I'm on the spot. And then I would highlight it and go up here and choose heading. And automatically there it is.
Oh.
And you'll see up top it'll say heading, title, subheading, no heading. So I'll choose like heading 1, heading 2, set them in just a little bit. And then you can go and you can change the font to whatever you want up in your ribbon as well. So it's a real simple process. There's not anything technical to it.
That's pretty great. That's great.
And so if I have a certain year, my first books are set in 962. So then I'll go and I'll find the year 962. Bam, there I am. All the events that happened in that time period. I mark off fictional characters with asterisks. So anything fictional in there has got the little asterisks on it.
That's excellent. Wow. I'm so impressed.
I don't know. I think do I have to stop the share to show the other documents, or do I just open one up? I'm not quite sure how that works.
I'm not sure either. I think if you just get out of this one, you should be able to open anything else that's on your thing. I don't know.
Yeah, I think that's how we do it. Okay, and then here's my research documents, and it's a similar you'll see on the side. I start out with the table of contents in there, but that's not linked. It's all in the side here. So then you go and you find your specific thing. So say I want to learn about social customs and then the heavy plows used at the time period. And so then I'll go and I'll learn about the tools that they would have used, your subheadings, and find all of the information in there. Or if I wanted to find my information on sports that they played, like hurling was really big in Ireland. So then I can go to my sports section and find the subheading on hurling and learn, oh, see here, I even have images of hurley balls.
That's cool. And you know what else is really great about this is, and I'm not sure how much Melissa's doing this, but when she does letters, when she does her blogs, her website, she's got all this material that she can share. So her blog site is becoming a resource for other people writing in the same genre, right?
Yes, it is. And I lost where I was going to go with that. But Rhonda had actually even mentioned it before with the copying and pasting from sources online too, and I actually use that. You can incorporate it in. Want to make sure you change your formatting, or it's going to make your document all wonky. But yeah, you can do that, and then I cite my sources that I get it from within my document, so that I always have those references too. One historical fiction writer had told me that it's important to try to find at least 3 references that agree with one another before you really go with it as the truth, which is difficult for my period. But,
That's true. That's true for academia too. I mean, like when we were writing papers, master classes, you had 3 sources. It was what was required. So yeah, that makes sense. Yes, everyone's wanting you to teach a class on this, Melissa. So yeah, there we go.
That's what I'm hoping.
To see.
That would be extremely helpful.
Leslie asked if I keep all of this on a blog or do I use Scrivener. I've heard another author that you should just keep it all in one place, but if you are writing in more than one book, your way makes more sense. I haven't used Scrivener. I've thought about using Scrivener. It looks neat, but it's one more learning curve for me at this point. So I use Microsoft Word for a lot of it. So I have Word documents, I have PDFs, and I use OneNote. OneNote's my favorite. I haven't quite got the gist of Evernote. Since I started out in OneNote, I'm adjusted to it. And I'm also very much about visual inspiration. So I love the fact in OneNote that I can create things around images. I have boards devoted to my stories and my research, and I'll cut and copy and paste things from the internet and put them on there and put little subheadings under them. And so I categorize things that way too for the visual inspiration as well.
Yeah, someone else mentioned OneNote too, so I'm glad you brought it up because that's another wonderful, wonderful tool for organizing all kinds of things.
But yeah, I have taken a free class on Scrivener, and yeah, you can do a lot of organizing that's very similar on it. You can even put images and things in it, and it looks like a really neat tool one day. But right now, I'm sticking to what I know.
And it does have a learning curve. I mean, I've had Scrivener, and it's just not my favorite thing, but I know other people that just absolutely love it. Yeah. So, everyone has different things. So,
yeah, definitely. And my blog is a resource too. Like you said, I do put things up on there. All of it comes from my research, so everything that's on my blog is also on my computer. But yeah, it does help to organize it in one way as well. Another way to back it up.
Yeah,
which is important. That's another thing we should address. Back up your research.
Yeah, Absolutely. So Evernote kind of lives in the cloud. I think OneNote does too.
Mm-hmm.
And if not, like Melissa's thing, I would be emailing that to myself every time I made changes to it. I'd be sending it an email to another email box.
Yeah, I have multiple sources. I do external hard drives, jump drives. I do online, and I do hard copies.
Yeah.
Cover all the bases, or as many bases as I can.
Absolutely. You do not want to lose all that research. And
yeah, it happened to me way back in the beginning when I didn't know about stuff. Back in the early 2000s when I was doing it, I had an old Dell laptop, and that was where everything was, except for some things I'd scribbled down in notebooks. And I got these tomes of Irish history that I had gotten through an interlibrary loan, because at the time we didn't have internet access in our house. And so I would go up to my in-laws' house to get online, but I had to do everything by hand or on my computer that wasn't attached to the internet, and the laptop was on its last legs anyway. And then one day and I had nothing saved. All of that research from that one group of books that I got was gone, except for a few notebook scribbles. And I was very sad.
Devastating when stuff like that happens.
Yeah. But it teaches you.
It does. The hard lesson.
Yes. Hard knocks are the best lesson.
That's right. That's right.
I apologize for moving around, but my laptop was going to die. I didn't realize it, so I had to move to another room.
Okay.
Oh, no problem.
You're good.
So I thought I saw some other questions in the chat. I don't know if
Yeah, Jan asked about how did you get to the navigate? How did you bring up the navigate menu?
Oh, in the Word document? You just, up in the ribbon, there's the search or find button up in your top right corner. Do I need to bring it up to show? Does that make it easier?
Do that just to make it.
Yeah. Here, let
See.
me pull up my timeline again here. Okay, so up here you have the find replace option. So here I could close it out. That's what you'd see normally in your document. If I want to bring it up again, I hit the find, and automatically it gives you that, but you can just hit your headings, and all your headings will show up. So you don't actually have to do a specific search, but you can, if you have a specific word and you don't want to go through all of your headings, then you can just type it in and find it that way too. But yeah, that's what I do, is I just go to the find up in the top right corner.
It's really good. Someone asked about being afraid. I think it was Norma, just being afraid of getting started. That's probably not exactly how she worded it, but, and then right under it was knowing when to quit. So I think sometimes because, having to do research for school can sometimes just be so boring, and you don't, think you don't like to do research. But actually, if you're doing research on something you're passionate about, something you love, it's no longer research. It's just fun, and there may be aspects of it that aren't as fun as other aspects. But, I think when you're wanting to delve into historicals, you have to love that era. I mean, Melissa, obviously, you can just tell she loves that Scotland of the 900s, and all of that. So, yeah. And then, sorry. And then, and I love World War II. I just love it. So it's no longer, it's not a chore. It's fascinating. It's interesting. And, so I think you just have to find that period that you really love and, work at that way. And when to quit, that can be really, really hard too, because if you're so interested in it and you don't know what you're going to find is just going to add to your story. But sometimes you just have to start writing the story, and then those things kind of come hand in hand. And when you come to something you don't know, sometimes you stop and you research it, and sometimes you just say, I've got to come back to that and go on. So like Joe was talking about the gardens of Versailles, and I mean, they were beautiful. Yep. If I was writing and did not know the exact name of a flower or even like what season, because that's always kind of stumbling to me, even again with contemporaries, what is in bloom, where, when, I just put brackets, flowers, and go on, because that's something I can look up later and it's not going to affect the whole story. If it's something that is deeper than that, that may affect events in the story, then I'm going to probably spend some time researching it right there before I go much further. So, you just have to sort of feel realize what the purpose of each aspect is, if it's just something to add background or if it's something that's integral to the story, but you still want to get all the details right. I mean, I don't want to have the wrong flower in the wrong state at the wrong time of year growing, so yeah.
Yeah. And it's a tough balance too. And there is a point where you have to say, I can't know it all. I can't get it all in the book. And I'm probably going to get some things wrong. And so you just do the best that you can with what you have. And two, another thing I was going to address there, it's a lot like writing too. Your research, you can become too close to it. And so oftentimes I think it's good to have somebody, an outside source, to look at it and say, yeah, this is too much, or what about this? I'm not sure about this. And people getting that feedback will oftentimes open it up. So you're like, oh, I never thought about that before. Like when I was first starting out writing, I had referenced a tent, a canvas tent in my story. And a kind author who also wrote historical fiction pointed out, would they have had canvas back then? I'm like, that's a good point. And so you go back and look, and it's like, okay, now I know I need to make this tent different material.
Yeah, I mean, it is interesting, just the little things that we sort of take for granted, and yeah, you have to go back and figure out when those things really came into being. Some words too, I mean, some words are very modern, and you have to be very careful about not including those in a time period where those would not have been the words that would have been used.
Yeah.
Leslie asked about the best way to back up your research, a hard drive and online links. I think it really I just back it up. I mean, whatever works for you, but just make sure you've backed it up. I email my manuscripts every day that I have written. I email that manuscript to myself so that I know that I've got the last copy of it. But it's also in the cloud now because my stuff does that. But yeah, whatever works for you, you want to make sure you have multiple places where you can get it back.
Yeah, I with the everyday stuff, before I shut down for the day, any document that I've updated, I'll copy it to Dropbox, so it's automatically saved online. And then periodically, weekly or monthly or whatever the time frame is that I feel I need to get it in there, I'll do backups on all the other hard sources. So I'll do an external hard drive backup. I'll do jump drive backups. Whenever I feel that I need to get those in, or I've let too much time lapse in between them. So yeah, whatever works best for you, something that you're comfortable with and you can operate. Yeah.
Well, my goal today was just to get us started on conversation and let the two of you really take off. And I think you really helped us tremendously. I also think that out of this, another class taught by you, Melissa, would be really, really helpful. So put that in your pocket and see what you guys can work on that for us.
Great idea.
Yeah, I have learned so much, and being somebody who is just starting on research, one of the things I've realized, and what you have said it so well, if you really love what you're doing and want to learn more, it's going to be fun. And that's how I feel for myself, that what I'm going to be researching is going to be a lot of fun. And Johnnie, you brought up some things that I hadn't thought about yet, is, what games were being played. Mm-hmm. All kinds of things like that I have to really look at and research. So I appreciate you guys so much. I don't know if there's any other questions.
Well, why don't we bring everybody on, because we've got about 4 more minutes. I mean, the time has just sort of flown by. So if everybody wants to come on, if you have trouble getting on, let us know. We can help you with that. I do want to say too that if you get a chance to visit plays, like I wrote a novella recently and takes place in Oak Ridge, Tennessee, and I was able to go there. And of course, the town has changed since the 1940s, but there's this little historical museum run by people who parents moved to Oak Ridge in the 1940s. That's the place where the atomic bomb research was being held. The government, built that town out of nothing. And, there was a lot of pictures, just a lot of really cool things in that little museum. So, I can't always do that. I mean, and of course, if you're way, way back, you can't necessarily, you're not going to see it exactly the same. But if if you are able to travel, it can be a really fun thing to do. And it's tax deductible when you're writing it for a story. So now that is not tax advice. Talk to your own accountant, but generally speaking, you can take that off, okay? Anyone want to add anything?
I just think this was so interesting. It was great. Thanks.
Well, thank you. Thanks to Joe for suggesting it. And yeah.
I think this is
I
part
wanted
one.
to try to.
What was that, Joe?
I said, I think this is part one, that there needs to be a part two. Just another plug, Melissa.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, we'll do that. I mean, definitely, because I think that was really helpful. I loved seeing her outline and how she does that. So
I will say quickly, Johnnie, I've learned never to assume that I know something.
Yeah.
Lots of things I think I know, I go back and I'm like, oh. For example, I typed the word sommelier in my manuscript, and then I thought, I wonder, and I looked online. That word did not come into use until 200 years after my time period. So, there's a word etymology, and so if you're not, I just typed in the word sommelier. First of all, you have to figure out how to spell it. Then typed in the word etymology, and it was instant. I mean, that's the beauty of the internet. You get an instant answer to a question like that, and oops. Okay, then I have to go back. Okay, what did they call? What was the person called who served, alcoholic beverages in a castle in the 16th century, and up I come with it, and guess what? It's butler. I said, you got to be kidding.
Yeah.
You're kidding me.
Cute. That is cute. Leslie asked, where is there the resource you used to find out when the word was used?
Yeah, I use the internet, and you search using the word etymology, ETY-mology.
And there is a website for that too. And
I think there is.
etymology.com.
Isn't it etymology.com? Mm-hmm.
Oh.
And you can do the search for phrases too. Say she drew a line in the sand. Okay, when did that term come into use? And you might be surprised when it did or when it didn't. So, I've learned not to just toss off certain expressions without looking it up. And it does take more time, but in the end, I'm confident that I won't have a gotcha, from some reader. And I've read reviews online, Amazon reviews online, where they just murder somebody. If they didn't do their research, you will get called out on it.
Yeah.
And some fans are more ardent about that than others. If you're writing Regency romances, you better know everything about that time period. And one more thing about just knowing when to end. Lots of times you'll realize that you're coming across the same information again and again and again. And when that happens, it's probably time for you to move on. That you'll see that as you're reading, you're not learning much new because you've already gotten that all in your head. So that can be a good time to realize, okay, I'm ready to get this story going. The name of the library in Oak Ridge, it wasn't a library, Rachel. It was the Oak Ridge History Museum, I think is what it's called. Yeah. They were so cool. The people there were very, very nice. So, anybody else have anything to say? Again, thank you for everybody in the chat. If you're watching the replay, we thank you too. We're always glad to have you do that. I'm trying to remember real quickly what we're doing next week.
Next week is the critique.
That's right. Norma knows. Norma knows. Yes. Norma, take it away, baby.
So next week we're doing a live critique online. So either on our Facebook members page, upload a one page that you want critiqued, or feel free to private message me, Norma Knowles Poor, on Facebook, and I will be sure to get your paper to the right person, the right genre, to be critiqued. And so we're looking forward to doing that next week. We think it'll be helpful in talking about good ways to critique and not so good ways to critique. So anyway, that's next week.
Great, great. All right. Anybody else have anything to say before? Okay. Thanks everybody for being here. Joe, thank you so much.
I
And
didn't do anything. All I did was ask some questions.
no, you were great. And again, let's do one more little plug for the your book club, please.
Yeah.
Yes, it's Yahweh Sisterhood Book Club. We meet the first Thursday of every month. Not only do we meet and read a book in advance, but we also get to meet the author. And so next month I have, Michelle Medlock Adams, who's going to be with us, and I'm very excited about that. So our Facebook page is Yahweh Sisterhood Book Club, FW for Fort Wayne. So you can get more information about us on there, and then there will be a link so that you can join us on Zoom for when we meet next month.
No, that's great.
And you will be with us in September. I think it's September 5th.
Yeah.
So we're excited about that.
Yeah, so I appreciate you inviting me. That I'm really excited about it too. All right, everybody, we will see you next week on Writers Chat. Thanks for joining us. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.